Hi, my name is Tommy Rowe of Rowe Films. I'm here to talk a little bit about the making of the short film Him, produced on the GH5S and Ninja V in ProRes RAW. So firstly, a little bit of background on this project. As a GH5 shooter and a huge fan of the Micro Four Thirds system, it was a real pleasure to have been asked to work with Atomos and LUMIX again. The process of coming up with a concept actually started with me thinking of some scenes that would be interesting to shoot and that would provide a variety of shooting conditions. So I started from there and then came up with a kind of narrative, a little story to fit in around those scenes. It's kind of a backwards way of doing things, but the purpose of this film was to test the GH5S and Ninja V combo, and of course ProRes RAW as a codec. So I eventually narrowed my ideas down to kind of three key scenes. Firstly, what I intended to be a beautiful golden hour shoot in the English countryside with only natural lighting. Secondly, a low-key indoor scene with a strong lighting contrast, and then a campfire scene at twilight or blue hour as a kind of low light setting. I thought that provided some nice variety and would test the kit and the codec, as well as provide an opportunity to get a bit creative and produce some nice looking visuals. So from there I came up with the little narrative of Him, really just to tie it all together. In terms of the story, I wanted to keep it a bit open to interpretation, create something with a bit of emotion. As a filmmaker, I love playing with emotion as a way to kind of make viewers connect with the work. For the story in this one, I wanted viewers to perhaps be slightly unsure if he exists, or maybe he's something else. And then I also wanted to have a little twist at the end. Since posting the film, I've actually heard lots and lots of different interpretations for the story, which is really cool. It's so interesting to see how different minds see things differently. In terms of the look and the feel of the film, I decided I wanted to go for a bit of a filmic look, and for that reason I decided to shoot it all on vintage lenses. I felt it suited the narrative well, and it would also show the versatility of this setup in terms of what kind of looks you can achieve with it. With the GH5S and Ninja V shooting in ProRes RAW, you can achieve pretty much any look you want. So I wanted to show that it's a great combo to use if, like me, a filmic look with a bit of vintage character is your thing. Okay, so there's a bit of background. Let's crack on and move on to the behind the scenes. Pre-production wise, I had locations in mind, and thankfully they were all free when we needed them to be, which was nice. Adam and Natalie did a fantastic job filling the roles, and they were brilliant to work with, so a massive thanks to them for that.
Oh, you went. So that top lip going.
You just broke slow.
Oh no. Just did that on purpose.
Settings wise, the entire film was shot at Cinema 4K, DCI, and of course in 12-bit ProRes RAW. The lenses I used were vintage Canon FDs, and then I used a Metabones FD to Micro Four Thirds speed booster. One of my favourite things about the Micro Four Thirds format is the ability to adapt pretty much any lenses you want, depending on the look you're going for. Schedule-wise, we actually shot the scenes on different days and in a different order to how the story plays out, but for the purposes of this BTS, I'll stick to how it runs in the film. First up was the opening meadow scene, where our talent meet. Maybe not for the first time, that is.
Yeah, so this is it. So like the idea is it's kind of creating that contrast between your performance, like at Powder, and very polished and nailed. This is going to be a bit like
a little bit more.
What I originally had in mind for this was a beautiful golden hour scene, as I wanted to really show off the beauty of the footage that comes from this setup. But sadly on this occasion that wasn't to be. The weather on the day didn't play ball, so we got on with the job at hand and made the best of it.
I'm gutted about this light.
Shooting in overcast conditions like these is a bit like having a giant softbox in the sky, so you tend to lose depth. Everything just kind of flattens out, and it was also really misty as well, which can wash your colours out. But looking at the Ninja, I could see that the image still looked lovely. and as we were shooting in ProRes RAW, I knew I'd have plenty of scope to push the footage around in post to bring back some of that pop. It really is testament to the codec that I was able to squeeze out some really nice colour, because realistically this might have been an occasion you'd opt to reshoot on another day. Because of those conditions, I decided to use a tiny bit of supplemental lighting in the medium shots and the close-ups, just to add a little bit of shape to the subject.
It's just giving a bit of shape.
Yeah, definitely.
Rig-wise, for these scenes I decided to go with a shoulder rig. I wanted the footage to look quite organic, and I love the intimate feel that comes with shoulder and handheld camera work. I particularly like using a shoulder rig at the moment, as you get the kind of shoulder height perspective and shooting angle. But with a fairly lightweight setup like this, you also have the option to tuck the shoulder pad under your arm, and that way you can shoot from the chest.
Nat, turn around, look at him, laugh and run. Chaser?
The great thing about this setup really is that it can be rigged up any way, so it was another great way to show how versatile this is as a shooting setup. Okay, moving on to the second scene, we had a little short transition sequence here of our talent putting on some makeup. It was just a nice way to be able to transition from the meadow scenes and into the castle.
So there's no sound at all, no?
No sound, no.
For the vid, no.
Next up was the main dance performance. Lighting wise, I wanted it mostly backlit. Initially I wanted to use haze in this scene to enhance the lighting, create a bit of atmosphere, and also to reduce contrast.
Oh mate, I think I'm getting too creative here for the BTS.
However, shooting in a 600-year-old castle, we weren't able to. So I used a diffusion filter instead, just to help a bit on those points.
It's actually alright mate, because it looks like it's coming in through a window or something like that.
Approaching this shoot, we did several takes of the piece of choreography that Natalie and Adam had put together. I shot mostly on the Ronin, but I got some pickup shots on the shoulder rig too. I did also do one take at 60 frames per second, just in case I wanted a little bit of slow motion. When you've got 4K DCI 60 frames per second in 12-bit ProRes RAW at your fingertips, it would be rude not to, really, wouldn't it? Finally, we have the final scene with the campfire. The main point of this scene was to really stretch the low light capabilities of the kit. The GH5S is a fantastic performer in low light, so I wanted to push that. We waited for blue hour so that it was dark enough, but I wanted some ambient light remaining so that you could still make out the surroundings and everything didn't just crush to black. We were also really lucky that whilst we were there, a sea fog rolled in and it just created so much atmosphere. It looked awesome. The only supplemental lighting I used here was one LED tube light set to a fire effect, and I used that just to boost the level of the fire a bit. You can get some weird shadows and things on the face of the talent sat in front of a fire, so it helped to fill those in and just create some shape on the face. Out of everything we've shot so far, I think this scene's probably my favourite. It just looked awesome.
Those lights going down look so good.
But I sometimes find when you're shooting in conditions like these, you just wish you could pause the rotation of the Earth, as it hits that perfect moment and everything looks amazing, but it moves on so quickly and it got really dark really fast. We didn't have the luxury of coming back again, so it was a race against time to get everything I needed before it got completely dark. Ultimately, nature won, and the final shots were in complete darkness. Once again though, it was amazing how much latitude I still had in post, and I was still able to push this footage around despite it being so dark. That 12-bit RAW codec held up perfectly, and I had no issues with colour or exposure. The shots were all really clean as well, and perfectly usable even without any noise reduction. I kept ISO at the base of 400 as I wanted to shoot pretty much wide open, but didn't want the flames or the lights in the background to clip. I knew I'd be able to bump the ISO up a tad in post if I needed to. For me, that's one of the biggest benefits of shooting in ProRes RAW. It's just one less thing to have to think about on the day, and it frees you up to really concentrate on what it is you're shooting. The other option, if I couldn't get enough exposure, would have been to bump up to the higher sensitivity of 1600 ISO in camera. That's really the only thing you need to decide beforehand when shooting in ProRes RAW on a camera with dual native ISO, high or low gain, because everything else is just recorded as metadata. So I decided to stick to 400 and it all came out really nicely. So I've been shooting on the GH5S since it was released back in 2018, and now thanks to ProRes RAW via the Ninja V, it's stronger than ever. Despite Murphy's Law being very real and a few things along the way not being exactly how I'd have wanted them, I'm really pleased with how the piece came out, and I do feel that we really tested the setup here. At no point did I feel like this setup couldn't handle the conditions I was throwing at it, and that really says a lot. So I would say it's an A star from me, and I would feel quite happy going into pretty much any shooting scenario that I can think of with this setup. The setup allowed me to produce a very high quality look and feel with a character that I love, and all from a small, compact and cost-effective rig. So on that note, I'd personally like to say a thanks to the guys at Atomos and LUMIX for continuing to update their product lines with killer features. So that's it for me for now. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I've got more to come on the post-production process, so stay tuned for that. But that's it for now. Cheers.